Prince Harry had survived public criticism, stripped responsibilities, and years of bitter distance from the institution he once called home, but nothing prepared him for the message delivered under his father's authority. In one decisive order, King Charles barred his younger son from every private royal gathering, family retreat, closed ceremony, and confidential palace meeting. This was no temporary cooling of tensions. It was a door being shut, and Harry understood immediately that the lock had been turned from inside. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry sat alone when the formal household directive reached him. A household directive is a written instruction governing royal residences, staff, and private events. He read it twice, pressed his thumb against the page, and asked whether the order had come directly from his father. The answer was yes. Confusion vanished. Silence took its place. The decision cut deeper, because it did not ban him from every royal appearance. Charles could still invite him to a public state occasion, where cameras and officials controlled every exchange. But family dinners, closed commemorations, holiday gatherings, confidential briefings, and ceremonies away from public view were now completely forbidden. Those rooms mattered because grief was shared there, loyalties were tested, and royal decisions began before the world heard a word. Charles felt the blow from the other side. At Windsor, the king listened as an aide confirmed delivery. Windsor is a principal royal residence and a private center of family life. He did not smile or defend the decision. He turned toward the window and asked whether Harry had replied. When told his son had said nothing, the monarch lowered his head. The harshest clause made the order almost impossible to escape. Any invitation from another royal household required the sovereign's written approval. Anne, Edward, or another sympathetic relative could not quietly restore Harry's place at a private table. The restriction transformed personal distance into enforceable palace policy. William read the final wording in his office and set the page down carefully. The prince supported stronger boundaries, especially around Catherine and their children, yet its permanent tone unsettled him. He noticed something else. The directive carried an earlier preparation date, proving Charles had begun considering exclusion before Harry knew the crisis had reached breaking point. That date changed everything. Someone had known. Someone had warned the king. Somewhere inside the family, a private moment had convinced Charles that ordinary distance was no longer enough. The order shocked Harry, but the deeper wound lay in discovering which members of his own family had known it was coming. Behind the formal language stood three men bound by blood and divided by years of accusation. Charles was not merely a monarch enforcing discipline. He was a father, choosing which son could still enter his private world. William was not simply the heir protecting the crown. He was a brother carrying memories that no decree could erase. And Harry, far from palace walls, was forced to confront the possibility that he had not merely left royal life had now left him. Harry felt the loss in places no public title could replace. Speaking to a confidant during a private call, he said birthdays mattered more than ceremonies, Christmas dinners more than balcony appearances, and memorials more than official invitations. Those gatherings mattered because they were where family members lowered their guard. Without them, he was not simply outside the institution. He was outside the memories still being made. Charles carried a different fear. The king believed gatherings could survive only if every person trusted that grief, anger, and uncertainty would remain inside the room. A monarch is the sovereign who leads the crown, but this choice reached beyond duty. In a late conversation with Camilla, he admitted that excluding Harry from official planning had been simple. Removing his son from family life felt like cutting away part of his past. The queen consort heard the strain and reminded him that repeated forgiveness without changed behavior had created deeper wounds. William understood those wounds too well. The prince had spent years separating public responsibility from private resentment, but Catherine and their children had changed the stakes. Another failed reconciliation could bring fresh pressure into their home, and he would not accept that risk. When Charles asked him alone whether the order sounded too harsh, the future king waited before answering. Then he said a boundary meant nothing if everyone expected it to vanish after the next emotional appeal. Yet William had not demanded the complete ban. He supported restrictions on confidential meetings, not automatic exclusion from every birthday or family dinner. That hesitation pointed to another influence. A confidential palace assessment, meaning an internal review prepared for senior royal decision-makers, cited Catherine's recovery, emotional stability, and household as reasons to prevent renewed pressure. Her name sat quietly inside the reasoning, but its presence changed everything. Harry studied the timeline and reached a conclusion. The decision had not begun with paperwork. It had begun when Catherine was placed under strain during a closed royal commemoration, and someone had carried that concern to Charles. To understand why Charles finally chose exclusion, the family had to return to one private ceremony where trust collapsed in a matter of minutes. The exclusion order did not begin in a legal office or around a polished council table. It began during a private memorial gathering at Windsor, where the family had assembled to honor the late Queen without cameras or public speeches. The occasion was meant to restore dignity and silence. Instead, one exchange shattered the fragile calm. By the time Harry left the room, Charles had reached a conclusion he had resisted for years. His son could no longer be trusted inside the monarchy's most private moments. Harry entered Windsor Castle guarded. The anniversary tribute was closed, meaning only invited relatives could attend, and no official record would be released. Charles had approved his son's presence because he believed grief for Queen Elizabeth II might create a path back toward trust. Yet Harry noticed the distant greetings, William's controlled expression, and Catherine's acknowledgement. To him, the invitation felt ceremonial, not sincere. Charles tried to break the tension before the tribute began. The king touched Harry's arm and asked him to remain afterward so they could speak without aids. Harry nodded, but the promise offered little comfort. William remained measured beside Catherine, while she sensed the strain building between the brothers. Every pause carried history, and every careful word hid accusation. The rupture came when Harry challenged William over changes to the family tribute. He accused the prince of deciding who could speak for their grandmother and who would be pushed to the edge of her memory. William replied that the order of remarks had been agreed for timing and dignity, not control. Harry rejected that answer. He said private family decisions were being disguised as royal duty, and the words struck the room like a warning. William pushed his chair back but did not stand. Catherine lowered her eyes, then looked toward Charles as the argument sharpened. The monarch placed his pen on the table and told Harry the memorial would not become another battlefield. Harry fell silent, but he did not withdraw the accusation. Charles saw grief turning into distrust before the tribute had begun. The damage deepened days later. A phrase used during the closed exchange appeared in a televised media discussion, and a documented palace review concluded that someone familiar with the conversation had repeated it. That evening, Charles asked his private secretary, his senior personal advisor, to prepare options restricting Harry's access to closed family occasions. Harry refused to accept that the memorial justified exile. Through a written request, he demanded a meeting with his father and insisted William be present. The confrontation at Windsor had created the wound, but the next meeting would determine whether it could still be closed or torn completely apart. Harry did not want another message delivered through secretaries. He did not want careful phrases, procedural explanations, or silence disguised as dignity. He wanted his father to look directly at him and explain why he was being removed from the family's private life. The meeting was granted under strict conditions: no aides at the table, no recording devices, and no discussion beyond the exclusion order. Yet from the moment William entered the room, it became clear that years of buried anger would not remain contained. Harry arrived at Clarence House, determined to force honesty into the room. Clarence House is the King's London residence and a place used for private royal meetings. Charles had agreed to see him without a formal council, but William was included because the order affected gatherings hosted by his household. Phones remained outside. Aides waited beyond the door. All three men agreed that nothing said inside would be released. Harry turned first to Charles. He asked whether he was still considered a son when birthdays, memorials, and Christmas dinners could be removed by written instruction. The king answered that blood had not changed, but access depended on trust. Love, he said, could not erase every breach, simply because the next appeal was emotional. Harry then faced William and accused him of wanting complete control over the family. The prince leaned forward, held his brother's gaze, and said protecting Catherine and the children was not control. It was responsibility. William had watched private tension reach his home before, and he would not allow another attempt at reconciliation to make his family feel exposed. The pressure shifted when Harry placed a dated copy of the exclusion proposal on the table. Charles looked down and admitted the policy had been considered before the memorial confrontation. Harry demanded the truth. The earlier draft had followed a private request from William, who had asked the king to prevent unplanned contact between his brother and Catherine's household after a personal appeal caused visible distress. Charles tried to keep his voice steady, but Harry struck at the wound neither man could avoid. He asked whether Diana would have approved of a father shutting out his son. The monarch's hand tightened around the chair. He warned Harry not to use their mother as a weapon, and for one moment, royal restraint gave way to raw anger. Harry stood first. No apology had been offered, and no invitation restored. Before leaving, he asked who truly held the power to keep the ban alive after Charles was gone. Harry entered the room, seeking a father's explanation, but he left determined to uncover the machinery that could make his exclusion permanent. A royal family disagreement can fade. A sovereign's household instruction does not fade so easily. Behind the emotional confrontation, secretaries, security officers, estate managers, and senior royals were already converting Charles's decision into a working system. Guest lists were revised. Private access codes were changed. Hosts were warned not to make exceptions. Harry had believed the order was a father's angry response. He now discovered it had become something colder, an operating rule designed to survive apologies, pressure, and even changes of heart. Harry discovered that the punishment no longer depended on one conversation. The Lord Chamberlain's office circulated a confidential protocol requiring the sovereign's personal approval before he could attend any private royal occasion. The Lord Chamberlain's office is the department that organizes major royal events and household arrangements. Windsor, Sandringham, Balmoral, Highgrove, and private areas of Buckingham Palace adopted the same access rules, closing every easy route back inside. Anne challenged the severity in a private meeting with Charles. The Princess Royal warned that administrative rules could outlive the anger that created them, turning a painful family decision into something almost impossible to reverse. The king listened, but Camilla urged consistency. She reminded him that previous attempts at reconciliation had produced fresh tension, and that repeated cycles of hope and collapse had wounded everyone involved. Charles faced the final implementation page alone. He held the pen above the signature line, asked the remaining officials to leave, and sat without speaking. The monarch knew his name would transform emotion into procedure. After several minutes, he signed. That single movement gave security teams, estate managers, and royal hosts a clear command they could not quietly ignore. William received authority of his own. The protocol stated that any event connected to his household required both the king's approval and the prince's consent. That gave the future king an independent power to deny Harry entry, even if Charles later softened. It also protected Catherine and the children from unexpected contact, which mattered, because their home could no longer be treated as the testing ground for another reconciliation. The rule reached beyond direct invitations. Anne, Edward, or another relative could not bring Harry into a private gathering without central approval. Yet one narrow exception survived. Charles could summon his son for a strictly private father-son meeting, separated from royal business and wider family access. Then the first test arrived. A private birthday dinner was approaching, and Harry's name was already written on the original guest list. Someone inside the family would now have to remove it, and explain why. The policy had been written in silence, but its first enforcement would expose the emotional cost before the entire family. The first consequence was not announced from a palace balcony. It appeared as an empty place at a dinner table. A private Windsor gathering had been planned weeks earlier, and Harry's name had originally been included. Then the new order reached the household. His place setting vanished. His security clearance was withdrawn. No public statement explained the change. Yet inside the family, Everyone understood what the empty chair represented. The first occasion from which the king's younger son had been deliberately and formally removed. Harry had expected the evening to be different. Before the exclusion directive, Edward had told him during a private call that the Windsor birthday dinner would remain small, personal, and limited to close relatives. A private royal gathering is a family event held without public access, official speeches, or press coverage. That mattered because such dinners offered something public ceremonies never could: unguarded conversation, shared memory, and proof that family ties still existed beneath royal duty. The cancellation came through a household official. Harry listened as the earlier invitation was withdrawn, then asked whether Charles knew. The answer was yes. He thanked the caller, ended the conversation, and stared at his phone. The rejection was no longer theoretical. His father had allowed the first empty place to remain empty. Edward carried the guilt into his own home. He told Sophie that he regretted offering hope he no longer had the authority to honor. The trusted confidant watched him remove Harry's name from his personal seating plan. Neither spoke for several moments, because both understood that one crossed-out name had become a symbol of the family's fracture. Charles noticed the consequence before dinner began. A footman removed the unused chair, and the king stopped speaking as it passed. Anne challenged him once the family sat down, asking whether protecting the institution required turning absence into ritual. The monarch replied that the order had to mean something the first time it was tested, or every later boundary would collapse. William nearly broke that boundary. Catherine learned he had drafted a message allowing Harry to attend under strict privacy conditions. The prince deleted it after remembering Windsor, the accusations, and the confidential words that later escaped. He chose protection, but the choice left him uneasy. Harry spent the evening with his phone nearby. He expected no invitation, yet part of him still believed Charles might call before dinner. The call never came. After midnight, another message arrived. Catherine asked whether he would speak privately, without advisors, demands, or accusations. The family dinner proved the exclusion was real, but Catherine's unexpected message offered the first chance to change what the order had come to mean. Catherine did not offer to overturn the king's order. She did not promise Harry a return to Windsor, a place at Christmas, or access to William's private household. She offered something smaller and, perhaps, more difficult: an honest conversation without aides, lawyers, cameras, or rehearsed accusations. They met in a private sitting room, away from the main palace offices. No institution stood between them. For the first time, Harry was forced to hear not what the monarchy feared, but what one person had personally endured. Catherine arranged the meeting with Charles's knowledge, but she refused to turn it into a palace exercise. No agenda waited on the table. No written record would be kept. No representative stood nearby to defend the institution. A palace representative is an official who speaks or acts on behalf of the royal household. She told Harry immediately that she could not cancel the directive and was not speaking for William. Harry listened, but the hurt remained close to the surface. He said the exclusion had confirmed his deepest fear, that the family saw danger before seeing a son, brother, or uncle. Catherine did not dismiss that pain. She told him that every private encounter now carried its own fear because personal words might later become part of a public account, stripped of tone, trust, and context. Catherine placed her untouched cup down. "You cannot ask for private trust while keeping public retaliation available," she said. Harry looked away, but he did not argue. The words landed because they named the choice he had avoided for years. He wanted intimacy protected for himself, while preserving the right to expose it whenever he felt wounded. Harry then admitted that he had prepared notes describing the confrontation with Charles and William. The account had been drafted for possible release through his representatives, but he had withheld it after receiving her message. Catherine stayed silent as he opened the document on his phone, deleted it, and agreed that their conversation would remain private. That action did not restore trust, but it changed the temperature of the room. Catherine softened without surrendering. She told Harry that restraint would not reopen every door, yet it might stop those doors from being sealed forever. He finally changed his demand. Instead of insisting that Charles withdraw the full order, He asked for one protected channel, where father and son could meet without royal business, negotiation, or public pressure. The palace began preparing revised language. Then the original exclusion reached the public before any announcement could be made. Harry had finally chosen restraint inside the family, but outside the palace, the story was already exploding beyond anyone's control. By sunrise, the exclusion was no longer a confidential palace instruction. It was the dominant royal story across Britain. Television panels debated whether Charles had protected the monarchy or abandoned his son. Commentators argued over loyalty, privacy, and punishment. Crowds gathered outside royal gates. Yet one image captured the controversy more powerfully than any speech. A newspaper front page showing Harry alone on one side, the royal family behind closed palace doors on the other. The palace confirmed the central truth before breakfast. Harry would not attend private royal gatherings unless Charles or another authorized household approved his presence. A private royal gathering is a family occasion held without public access, official speeches, or press coverage. The statement refused to discuss the conversations behind the decision, but that silence only deepened the argument. Some people saw a necessary boundary. Others saw a father using royal authority to enforce personal estrangement. A major London newspaper captured the division with 3 brutal words: "The door is closed." The front page showed Harry walking alone on one side, and the Windsor gates closing behind a royal vehicle on the other. Near the Long Walk, supporters demanded privacy for the family, while critics called the punishment cruel. One handwritten card placed beside the gates read, "A son is still a son." That message spread across broadcasts, turning one family's fracture into a national argument about mercy, duty, and belonging. Charles saw the headline at breakfast. The king studied it without speaking, folded the page inward until Harry's photograph disappeared, and asked staff to remove the remaining newspapers. The monarch had wanted control, not spectacle. Now the private pain he had tried to contain had become a public judgment on his fatherhood. Harry faced pressure of his own. Advisors urged him to answer through a recorded interview or written statement, but he remembered Catherine's warning and refused to reveal the private meetings. His silence reached William, who learned that his brother had declined several interviews. The prince admitted to Catherine that restraint did not repair the past, but it was the first action in years that reduced rather than expanded the damage. Charles responded with one measured change. He kept the ban on broader family events, yet formally protected a confidential father-son channel. Either man could request a private meeting, provided royal business, media strategy, and public disclosure remained outside the room. The monarchy had defended its boundary. Now Charles had to decide what kind of father remained after the crown had spoken. The world had delivered its judgment loudly, but the final verdict would be decided in one quiet meeting between a father and the son he had excluded. There was no dramatic reversal. Harry did not return to the private royal calendar, and Charles did not tear up the order that had shocked the world. The monarchy's boundary remained intact. Yet the final meaning of the crisis was not found in a guest list or palace protocol. It emerged when father and son met alone, without William, advisors, or cameras, and accepted a painful truth. Reconciliation could not begin by pretending trust had survived. It could begin only by admitting that love had survived its collapse. Harry entered Highgrove knowing nothing had been restored. Highgrove is the king's private country residence, used for family time away from formal palace business. Charles was already waiting, with no papers or officials between them. The king pointed toward the chair opposite him and said the meeting was not about titles, invitations, or the monarchy. It was about what remained between a father and his son. Charles spoke first. He told Harry the exclusion had been necessary as sovereign, but devastating as a parent. The monarch admitted that its severity had made his younger son feel discarded, even though that had not been his intention. Harry listened, then accepted his own part. He admitted that public disclosure had become a shield whenever private conversations hurt, destroying the safety family intimacy required. Neither man asked for instant forgiveness. Charles offered no immediate place at Christmas, Windsor, or William's private events. Harry demanded none. Instead, they agreed that trust would be measured through repeated restraint, not emotional promises made inside one painful room. Their confidential channel would remain separate from royal negotiations, media strategy, and arguments over status. William kept the boundary around Catherine and their children. The prince would not expose his household to another cycle of conflict. Yet Catherine recognized that the father-son channel prevented discipline from becoming permanent emotional exile. Her intervention had not reopened the palace doors, but it had stopped one relationship from disappearing behind them. Harry rose to leave. Charles did not summon an aide or allow distance to finish the meeting. The king walked beside his son and opened the door himself. It closed after Harry, but this time, it was not locked. The verdict was final. Birth no longer guaranteed private access. Trust had become the price of belonging. The crown kept its boundary. Harry accepted the consequence. Charles preserved the one bond royal authority could discipline, but never erase. The monarchy chose protection over appearances. Harry chose silence over retaliation, and Charles finally understood that closing the palace doors did not require closing a father's heart. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.